Yeah, I know. We'll run through it. A lot of it's kind of matter of that. We're trying to figure out what to do. I know. I haven't got trying to figure out what to do with our vote it in 2 weeks because it's on Wednesday. We're not on the meeting for. If we get enough people to work, I'm sure we can be part of the class. Get people time. I know. I told this from day one, but we have to do what we have to do. Not a class. When we stop counting people who are virtually off the way. Sooner rather. I agree with you, but it's hard to make happen. Yeah, we should do it for higher.
Mike?
Yeah.
Do you need anything from me regarding the board meeting and the committee? And do you need me to do anything? Do you need any help with anything?
No, but can I call you after Minyan for a minute? Or what?
Absolutely.
Or do you have to get to work? Or are you going to stay for?
I'm working from home, so you can absolutely call.
Let me have, I have your number, but let me make sure I have it.
Okay.
Just hold on a second.
Sure.
Yeah, just give it to me right now.
Let me give you my house phone number because it works better. It's 210 444 9127.
I'll call you after Talmud.
That sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Morning, Miguel.
How are you, Mike?
Good.
Hey, everybody, I'm here. We can get started.
All right, Bruce is here, so we're getting started. You heard the man. So in honor of Bruce being here, we're going to get started. On page 6 with Birchot HaShachar, we ask that if you're able, you please rise as we welcome in the new day and Bruce. Page 6. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sech v'vein halev v'in v'eino v'vein hayla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher asani betzamo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Bisharumhim, Baruch Adonai Elohim Matir Asurhim, Baruch Adonai Elohim Zokef Kefufim, Baruch Adonai Elohim Rokaretz Al Hamayim, Baruch Adonai Elohim Salikot Zarki, Baruch Adonai Elohim Mechin Mitzadeh Gavver, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam mozei b'chorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam mozei b'tifarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam natan li'af koach. Baruch atah Adonai. Otneinu hayom v'choyim lechanu chesed orachamim b'nech v'nechoreinu v'tigmaleinu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai Gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. You may be seated. Page 7. Yehiraton. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu manayim goraleinu miyafa yerushateinu. Ashreinu shanachnu mashkimim arivim erev avot gevrim pamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Kadesh Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha Vekadesh Shimcha B'Olamecha Vishuata Tarim V'Tagvi Karneinu Baruch atah Adonai Vekadesh Shimcha B'Arabim atah Adonai Choose our rabbinic text to study between pages 9 and 12. Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani Matzinu Shehakol Baruch HaKadosh Baruch Page 12. Yehi hatzon milfanech Adonai Eloheinu melai avoteinu shetiten chalkeinu b'toratecha v'niyavim tamidat shel Aaron HaKohen ohev shalom v'rodef shalom ohev et abriot m'korban laTorah. Please rise for Kaddish Rabbanan, page 13. Yitzgadal v'yitzgadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Almat yivrach v'yamalech malchutei.
Ron v'chaye lechol bet Israel v'agala b'zman karev אמרו אמן. ויהיה שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולהרבה הלוויה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויהדר יתעלה ויתעלה שימי לקודשה ברכו. ותא ונחמתה יאמירן בעלמם ואמרו אמן. לרבנן והתלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי הון וכל מאן דעסקן דאורייתא יהי בכל אתר ואתר. יהא להון ולכל שלום רבה פינה וחיטה ורחמים חיים עריקים ובריאה רווחה. וכנה מתקדם ושמיה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה משמיה וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו וברחמתו לציון. Amen.
You may be seated. Psalm 30, page 14. These more shir. Let me spin in a holy with Dr. Sakivitas. When you see Mechal, and man is a Mechal, Adonai Elohai. Mourner's Kaddish, page 15. Yitzgadal, Yitzgadal,
Osei Shalom Bimramo, Uyasei Shalom, Eleno V'Yakar Yisrael
Please rise
V'Yanu.
for Baruch Shemar, page 16. Baruch Shemar V'Yaolam Baruch.
Baruch Hu.
Baruch Osei Bereshis, Baruch Omed Yaseh, Baruch Osei Chayei, Baruch Narachim Avoretz.
Baruch Shemar. Yachid Chayal Hami Melech Meshuvach V'Ret Shema Gadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Me'olam Tishbachol. You may be seated, page 17. Ki kol Elohei Amim Elihim Adonai Shemayim Asad Ve'Hata Lefanav V'Zachavim Minkom. How's your name? Ram him Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavo lahar kodsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu v'harachnu michaper on page 19. Adonai tzavod Hashem ashrei adam boteach bach Adonai Hoshea melech yaneinu v'yom koreinu Hoshea et amecha v'arachatach.
Hoshea Mecha V'Reches V'Asecha.
Ashrei. Bani b'chasdecha v'tachti ageli v'vishuatecha asher Adonai ki gamal alai mizmor etadar l'kol haaretz. Page 20. Yitav hanaylel hamchasto v'edor v'edor emunato yehi chabad Adonai v'edor. On machshavot. Yitav. Ve'hurach u'miachaper ban v'lo yashchit ve'bal hashiva po v'lo ye'erkoch chamato Adonai Hoshea melech yaneinu v'yom koreinu. Page 21. Ashrei.
Ashrei
Ashrei Ashrei. Hashem Shekhosh. Tehillat Adonai per pivarech v'asar shem kodshol elam b'hed v'anach v'arech yamit haver olam hallelujah hallelujah hallelujah
Adonai.
Adonai shomer et kerim yatam emanadi dead v'derech Hashem yavet imlach Adonai le'olam elahai tzion ledor v'ador Magid Rav Yaakov Chukav Mishpatav Israel Asachen L'chol Goy Mishpatim Ba'irahum Hallelujah
Hallelujah.
Page 24. Shmei Hashemayim Moshe V'Ashel V'Kito. Vayarhem Karen Le'amot Ilalecho Chasidav Divnei Shalom Krova Hallelujah Hallelujah Adonai Shechadash. Page 25. Elohim le'sor malchechem bezikim v'chvedechem b'chav le'varzel asot b'mishpat katuv Hadar lechol chasidav. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Middle of page 25. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael Senifad Nebajo Baruch Shem Kavod Olam V'lech Polet Kol Haaretz Amen Ve'amen. All right, verse 26. Vayivarech David et Adonai. Tivotecha Tahu Adonai Lemedecha. אתה הורנה אלוהים אשר בחרת באברהם ויצאת מרקסתי ושמת לשמו אברהם בצאת לבבו נאמן לפניך בחרתי בברית והים בקעת לפניהם בעבר בתוך הים ביבשה ואת רודפי משלחת מנסות כמו אבן במים עוזים וישע אדוני וירא ישראל את הגלולה אשר עשה להם ממצרים ויראם את אדוני ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו אז השיר משה ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני ויאמרו לאמור השיר על אדוני כי גאוגה סוס ברוחו
Rama Mariam
עוזים מזמתיה
Yehi Yeshua
Elohei Aviv Haram Amenu Adonai Shmilchama Adonai Shemo Markevot Baro Vechelo Yarabayam Omichashal Hishav Tubehu Beyam Sov Tehomot Yechas Yomo Yardu B'tzalot K'mohen Yemicha Adonai Dedari B'koach Yemicha Adonai Tirhatoi Yehoverogon Yitzvot Melonosim Shalal Timaynu Ari Charbin Micha Bocha Shalom Yirgizim As Nifalatim Melim והלומשים בארצי נשפט הרי סב ויצל אדוני המלוכה והיה אדוני למלך את כל הארץ ויאמר אדוני אחד ושמו אחד page 29 ישתבח שמך ליד מלכנו ברכות והודות ויצא עולם ברוך אתה אדוני המלך גדול בתשבחות על הודעות אדוני נפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלפי
העולמים
קדש מרבה
אמן
תפרח ימלך מלכותי וחייכון ומחון וחיי לכל בית ישראל לגלה בזמן קריב ימרו אמן
אמן מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch
Baruch Adonai Amorah,
Baruch Adonai
Olam.
HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed. Baruch
Baruch
atah Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam. Yitzchak v'rech Moshe chosei shakol v'ret hakol. You may be seated. 5 lines down on page 30. Amir la etzel Adonai melech habarachim. Blessed be Maltana. El Baruch Adonai. Dehelati Doctorim. כולם אוהבים, כולם בררים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים בהם עבד הרצון קונם, וכולם פותחים מביעים בקדושה וטהרה, בשירה וזמרה ומברכים משבחים, ומערים ומעריצים, מקדישים וממליכים, את שם האל המלך, המגיבה והנורא
Yoshu.
וכולם מקבלים עליכם במלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות לזה, להקדיש יוצא בנחת רוח, ושפה ברימת מילה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים, ואומרים מירה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, אלוהי כל הארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש, באשכנז מנסים הצרפים לעומתם, משבחים ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אור חדש לציון תאיר, Page 32. אבינו לשלום מהכנפות הארץ, ושליחים מקוממי לארצנו, כי על פה ישועות אתה, ואנו בחרתם מכל מלשון, וקרבתנו לשמך גדול סלע באמת, להודות לך את פתם באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני, אבוכי בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל,
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
ואהבת את אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מעשיך והיו הדברים
אשר אנוכי
אנוכי
משבחך היום על לבביך ושיננתם בלבביך ויבטח בם ושפלך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך
ובקמות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבת המזוזות בין עיניך ובישעריך. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב נכון ותהיו אמת. לתורך קיים ושמו קיים וכיסא נכון ומלכותו במנתו לעד קיים ודבר חיים וקיימים. טוב. Emet shata Adonai Eloheinu v'lo yavoteinu Malkeinu melech avoteinu Godinu gol avoteinu Yotzreinu tzor yeshuateinu Pareinu matzilenu me'olam Shemecha Elohim zorateinu Page 35. Tehillah Elyon Baruch Borah B'nei Israel Echanu Shira B'simcha Rabba V'yamru Cholam Michamoch Havayim Adonai Michamoch Hanedot HaKodesh חדש שמתורגלים לשמחה שפת הים יחד כולם אותו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני Lord Israel Koma Ezrat Adonai Tzvaot Shemo Kedosh Israel Baruch Adonai Israel. Amidah together on page 36b, continuing through the Kedusha on 37, and then going silently the rest of the way through our Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Kol Elohei Racham Elohei Leah Ahel Lagadol Hagibor V'Adonai Elyon Chasadim Tovim Shonei Yaakov Ezocher Chasdei Avot Umevi Gohel Livnei Bneihem Leman Shemo V'Ahava Melech Yosef Oged U'Moshiach Magid Baruch Adonai, Magid HaMashiach Ketzara, Atagi V'Yad Adonai V'Chaim Etim Mashiach, Yorid Hatal, Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechaim Etim Rachamim Rabim, Sovech Nofim Berochecho Limatir Asurim, Mekayim Amanato Lishenei Afar, Bichamot Hava Gevorot U'Mitobecha, Melech Mevit Mechayim Matzmiach Yeshua, Remana Talachayot Metim Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayim Metim Avadam Kishem Shmakdishim Oto B'Shmei Marom Kakatuv Vayakmiyecha B'Karel Ze'V'Yamar
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, ולא כל הארץ כבודו.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Halayis Kevoto, Leomatam Baruch Yomeru.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
Baruch Kibod Adonai Mimikomo, Divrei Kodesh Katuv Lemor.
אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור הללויה.
Adonai Elohim Elohei Tzion, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah, Ledor Vador Nagid Kodecha, Netzach Netzachim Kedushat Chanakdish, V'Shivchacha Eloheinu Mipino Lo Yamru Shnei Olam Moed, Ki HaMelech Gadol V'Kadosh Ata, Baruch
ברוך
Atah
אתה
Adonai.
קדוש.
Give us sin. Pardon us, Lord, we have transgressed. You forgive and pardon us. You are first to forgive. Behold our affliction and deliver us. Redeem us soon because of your mercy. You are the mighty King of grace. You are the mighty. You came with the people is, and we shall be healed by this and saved. You are the glory. Bring perfect healing to our afflictions and make you over our sin. Answer us. Sin complete from our body, soul, and worship. With all that is worship and strength and nourishment. Yes, I wish the best of you. Praise you, Lord, and bless you. It's not a great children to go up to the side of them together. That's first. And so you are praise you, Lord, and that is the first. People restore our churches, praise it, restore our constitution. So, reign over us, you alone, loving kindness and mercy, justice, sustain our God. Praise you, Lord, and our sovereign, you are justice. Let's seek the chosen alliance, all we soon disappear.
If you're still praying the Amidah, feel free to continue. Otherwise, we continue with short Tachanun, beginning on page 62. Osreinu Elohim all the Kavod Shemecha Batzinu Chapech Atatenu Lemhan Shemecha. Please rise for Chatzi Kaddish, page 64. Yitzgat Yitzkadash Shemei Rabba Ve'al Hadi Rakirute Ve'amlech Malchute V'chayechonu V'yemechonu V'chayei L'chol Beit Yisrael V'agalav Yisman Kariv V'meru Amen. Yehesh Mechara Ve'amala Ve'amayha Itbar Hachlish Shabach Vitbar Vitramam Vidase Vita Vita Le Vita Lash Medikodesha Berichu El Haming Shirata Tushmechata Venechmata Damiran Ve'amavimeru Amen. You may be seated. Ashrei is found on page 78. Ashrei Yoshvei Peitech Tehillat al-Naida per pivi verakobas Hashem kochalelam ba'ed v'anach nevarch yamet aved olam hallelujah lam natzech mizmor leDavid. Makarov and come to Benito, Adonai Hashem Melech Yadheinu Vehim Korenu Valetzion Gohel, page 80. Ve'hatakadosh Shebti Israel Ve'karzel Zeve'amar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzva'ot Melech Haaretz Kadosh Kadosh Vatisa Eini Ruach Vesh Machorei Korash Gadol Baruch Kavod Adonai Mikamon
Adonai Melech
ויבטחו בחיירי שמך, כי לא עזבת ראשך אלוני, אלוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידיר. Please rise for Kaddish Shalem, page 82. יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה, אמן תברח קירותי וימלך מלכותי, וחייכון ומחון וחייך כל בית ישראל, וגלה בזמן קריב וימרו, אמן. יהי say, Vita 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 Shmena Koresha Bericho, and Amikata Vishirata, Amiran Melmavi Meru, Amen. Tika Batsalat and Baton, Deflaisra, Kadamavon Vishmaya Vimeru, Amen. Yesh Lama Rabbamin Shmaya, Vayavali Melko Israel, Vimeru, Amen. Shalom, Aleinu Melko Yisrael, Vimeru, Amen. We're going to pause for just a moment as we turn to page 152. We'll be counting the Omer. We actually counted it last night. This is for all y'all who didn't get a chance to count it last night, so we're going to count it with you this morning. We're going to read the English paragraph on 152, I am ready. We'll do the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, underneath that on 152. And we'll turn to page 155. We'll be counting the day of the Omer that was last night, the day that comes after 30. So the day that comes after 30 is what we'll be counting today. Back on page 152. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer as it is ordained in the Torah. You shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach, when an Omer of grain is to be brought as an offering, 7 complete weeks. The day after the 7th week of your counting, you make 50 days. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al spirat ha'omer. 155 as we count Hayom echad u'shloshim yom shehem arba'a shavuot u'shlosha yamim omer. Yep, that's right. Today is the 31st day of the Omer. That's 4 weeks and 3 days of the Omer. So close to Lag BaOmer. May the days continue to be blessings for all of us. And we turn back to page 83 as we'll continue with Aleinu. Aleinu leshabeach Kakatu b'Toratech Adonai himod Warner Scottish is found on page 84. It's Gada, it's Gada, Shnei Rabba. Ve'alma Tigra, Ve'alma Ayechon Ve'olechon Ve'chayed Ve'Yisrael Agala V'Zman Kariv V'Meru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba V'Varach Ve'alam Ve'almayim V'Yitbarach V'Yitzha'ar V'Yitzalam V'Yitnaseh V'Yitzadar V'Yitzaleh V'Yitzalal Shmei D'Kudeshah B'Richu Ela Minkum Birchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechemata Damiran Ve'alma V'Yimeru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba V'Yishmaya V'Chayim Aleinu V'Yalko Yisrael V'Yimeru Amen.
Amen.
Say Shalom B'Brana Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. You may be seated if you're standing. Psalm for the day is on page 87, bottom, near the bottom, the Psalm for Wednesday. Hayom Yom Revi'i b'Shabbat, Sheba Hayom Beit HaMikdash. Yaakov bin Abari. Asher Hagavin. Yaakov. Vechon het hanen aladon hainari aletzor yishehen nekad mafana betotam bismirod nari alho ki hel gadol adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim. We continue to send our condolences to the family during the Shloshim period of Bernard Cohen. We also remember the Yortzites today, Wednesday, April 28th, of Rose Gittleman Cohen, Leo Hirsch, and Jeanette Millican. If you have additional names to add, feel free to do so at this time. Final Mourner's Kaddish is found back on page 84. Yitzgada ve'yitzgada shemei rabba.
Amen.
Yalma tibrach ve'yamlich malchutei. Chayechanu v'yomechanu v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Agala u'vizman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabba levarach le'olam l'omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitzba'ar v'yitruham v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudasham b'richu. Elam birchata v'shirata u'shmechata v'nechamata Damiram Yama v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shlam rabba linshmaya Chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Oseh shalom libracha Uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Boker Tov, good morning, everybody. Thanks for helping us to make a minyan. We can do all the parts, including rabbinic Kaddish. That was great. Announcement-wise, one thing before I'm gonna teach Talmud in just a moment. So if you want to stick around for that, great. But one announcement either way. Today, Wednesday, tonight actually, today the 28th at 5 p.m. in the courtyard is Lag BaOmer celebration with falafel dinner, rock painting, etc. Apparently the RSVP deadline was Monday. I don't know if there's wiggle room on these things. I have no idea. But in any case, it should also warn you that tonight is not actually Lag BaOmer. We're doing it a little early because of the IPRS kids and whatever. Lag BaOmer starts tomorrow night. Yes. And so, just so you know, there'll be no Tachanun on Friday, in case you were worried. That's the only liturgical change. There's not extra Torah reading or anything. So anyhow, just that's a heads up for all y'all to be aware of. Otherwise, I'm going to teach Talmud in just a moment, and have a great day either way. I'll be right back. Boker Tov, good morning.
Good morning.
Boker Tov. Thank you, Rabino. I'm going to go on the computer.
Okay.
Did I walk? Yes, I did. I did walk today. Yesterday I didn't walk, but today I did. You know, it was warm though, walking in my shorts and sweating, like 73 degrees, 5 in the morning. So, you know, Texas. Where's my sheet? There we go. All right. Hello, friends. Good to see y'all. Today, it may look like a lot of text, but it's really, a lot of it's very just matter of fact. There's not much to say. Not that there's not much to say, but it's like either you agree with the rabbis or you don't. It's not like a lot of this. There's a little dispute in here. There's a little story at the end, but a lot of it is kind of just, they're just telling you like they think it is. And I call it scholars and epicorsim. The word apicorus, or epicorsim, the plural, it's kind of a weird one, as we'll see. Kind of a dispute as to what they are. What is an apicorus? In the modern Hebrew, it's a heretic, right? So even the Rambam talks about an apicorus as being a heretic. Even the rabbis in the Talmud talk about it, but they're going to give nuances to what makes somebody a heretic, really. what makes them like that. It does have, likely, it's funny because in the Hebrew, the Aramaic, the sages are convinced it comes from the word pakar, to like disrespect or that sort of thing. But likely, as you can look at the word, what word does it look like? It looks like the name Epicurus, right? It seems to be an Epicurean ideas and really heretical things for the Jewish people 2,000 years ago. The idea that maybe there's no God or anything like that. So that's probably where the term originally comes from. But in any case, this is a term, you can look up the history, really interesting. I think Wikipedia has an article on it even. They talk about how the Christian censors in the Talmud were much more in favor of this sort of term than they were in favor of terms, because like the Talmud has lots of things about non-Jews and how they suck sometimes, right? Whatever, like it's the Talmud. I'm not here apologetics, like it is what it is. But Christian censors who were in charge sort of were like, that term is bad, this term is bad, but they like this term because it doesn't have anything to do with them. It doesn't reflect on them. Just like they like star worshipers as a term of somebody that the Jewish people don't like because the Christians don't worship stars either, so they don't mind. But they don't like if we say Notzrim, if you say Christians, if you make allusions to Esav and things like that. They don't like that. So they'll censor that and put in a term like Epicurus. That's just a heads up in case you were curious. You can look up more if you're interested. In any case, let's just jump right in and you'll see what I mean. Rabbi Alexandri, oh, and by the way, if you want, of course, the link is via Facebook. You can find the Google link on our page. And it's going to be Sanhedrin 99b. So we're almost done with Sanhedrin. We'll get there by the end of my time here. Rabbi Alexandri says, anyone who engages in studying Torah for its own sake, like Torah Lishma is what we say, for its own sake, you're just studying Torah to be immersed in Torah. Anybody who does that introduces peace into the heavenly entourage above and into the earthly entourage below. As the verse in Isaiah says, let him take hold of my stronghold, Ma'ozi, that he may make peace with me, and he shall make peace with me. So one who observes Torah, we call Torah Oz sometimes, right? Ma'ozi, if you take hold of my stronghold or my Torah, then you can make peace. So if you use Torah, if you study Torah, just for the sake of studying Torah, you make peace in the world, up above with God, down below with humans. That's good. So study Torah, it will create peace in the world. Rav says, one who does this, it's as though he built a palace of heaven above and of earth below, because there's another verse from Isaiah that says, I've put my words in your mouth. God's words are Torah, of course, they're in my mouth. And I've covered you in the shadow of my hand to plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth and say to Zion, you are my people. So God says, when you study my words, which is Torah, then you help to actually build the foundations of the earth and the heavens. You're creating wondrous structures above and below. Literally, maybe, right? If you follow God's words of Torah, maybe you are creating wondrous structures below, structures above. Maybe there's a metaphysical, spiritual aspect you're creating. Maybe it's something deeper. I don't know. In any case, you can tell it's good. When you study Torah for its own sake, you're a builder in the world. We like to be builders, not destroyers. Next, Rabbi Yochanan says, one who engages in Torah study also protects the whole world. So when you study Torah, you actually create protection in the world. How do we know that? Because the same verse. And I've covered you in the shadow of my hand, same verse from Isaiah. And Levi says, he also advances the coming of the redemption, as it's stated in Say to Tzion, you are my people, also the same verse. So we have all these rabbis who agree studying Torah for its own sake is wonderful. They think it does different big world things. It has big world implications when you study. They're all study Torah. They're all good, but they're just different. Like maybe you help to bring peace into the world. Maybe you help to build the world. Maybe you help to protect the world. Maybe you help to hasten the redemption of the world. They're all big, good things. Maybe it does all of those things, right? Interesting. Also, it makes you wonder, are these the things the rabbis are really worried about? Like, is Rabbi Yochanan really like protecting the world's the main thing? Or is it just how he derives it? We don't know. Interesting, though. Reish Lakish said, with regard to anybody who teaches Torah to somebody else's son, the verse ascribes him credit as though he formed the student, as it stated, and Abram took Sarai, his wife, and the souls that they formed in Haran. There's this weird thing in the Bible in Genesis where it says they like made souls, right? Like Sarah and Abraham, or at this time Sarai and Abram, made souls in Haran. What does that mean? So the rabbis say it means they helped make converts. But here's another way to understand it. They were teaching them Torah. When you teach Torah to people, you help to form their soul. Are you forming their Jewish soul? You're just forming their ethical, moral soul. I don't know, but it's interesting, right? When you teach Torah, you're creating a person in some way. That's really important, right? We're just like God, we're creating. Okay, Rabbi Elazar says it's as though you fashion the words of Torah themselves, right? When you study Torah, when you teach somebody else's, it doesn't need to be son. Let's just say when you teach anybody's offspring Torah, let's just make it more egalitarian, then you actually create the words of Torah themselves. That's big. How do we know that? It's stated in the verse Deuteronomy, observe the words of this covenant, v'asitem otam, right? And do them and make them. So make the words of the covenant, ta-da, right? You're making the words when you teach them. That's cool. Rava says, it's as though he fashioned himself, not the words, but himself. Why? It says, v'asitem otam, but don't read otam, which is them, and he made them. He made the words of Torah. Read it as atem, which means you, and he made you. And you made you, right? Which is kind of weird. And you made you, but that's what they're saying. You make yourself. When you teach somebody else words of Torah and you study words of Torah, you create yourself. What does that mean? I mean, there's a lot of things it could mean, but I like to assume it means you make yourself anew. When you teach others, you also create who you are in some way. You reassert what values you have. You figure out new things. Whenever you teach, you also learn. In some form, while you're making them, you're also making you. So interesting, like Torah is dynamic. When you're engaged in it, it's not little world things, it's big world things. You're making huge change in the world. When you teach somebody's child, you're changing them, you're changing the words, you're changing yourself, right? Torah is the change maker. The opportunities are endless, right? This is what the rabbis want you to take away. Then Rabbi Abahu says, with regard to anybody who causes somebody else to engage in a matter of a mitzvah, they do some kind of good deed, the verse gives him credit as though he performed it himself. So if I say like, hey, Phil, I'm going to use an example. Hey, Phil, I really think it'd be great if you put a mezuzah on your door. It's just such a good mitzvah. And Phil says, I'm going to do it. Then I also get the credit because I helped to cause him to do the mitzvah, right? How do we know that? There's a verse in Exodus. It says, and the Lord said to Moses, your rod with which you struck the river, take it in your hand and go, right? So Moses, you hit the river with your rod, so now go through. But if we look back 10 chapters, was it Moses who struck the river? No, right? Who struck the river? Aaron struck the river, right? Moses doesn't strike the river, the Midrash says, because the river saved his life. Moses isn't going to strike the river. It was Aaron who struck the river. Does God not know? Did God forget 10 chapters later who struck the river? Is our Torah full of errors? No. What does it teach you? It teaches you that anybody who causes another to do a mitzvah, we give them the credit as though they performed it. So what's God saying when God says the rod with which you struck the river? God is saying the rod with which your brother struck the river, but you helped to cause him to do that good deed. You also get the credit as though you had struck the river for all good things, right? So this is so nice. All of this is just, it's really pocket Torah, beautiful. Like you want to convince somebody to study, this is how you do it. You tell them these things and they'll say, wow, this is really nice. But then we transition into those who don't take Torah seriously, right? It's actually because of the Mishnah, which I didn't bring you. But in the Mishnah, this is the next topic. It's talking about Torah study. Then it talks about an Apikoros. So, but we can see the connection is very easy to understand. An Apikoros is somebody who somehow denies Torah. And therefore, we're talking about Torah and its merits. And then we come in and we say, what happens when you're somebody who doesn't understand the merits in some way? So one of the people who doesn't have a share in the world to come, because that's what we're talking about in this section, is all the people who don't have a share in the world to come, if you'll recall. One of them is an Apikoros, which we talked about right at the start here. Rav and Rabbi Hanina say, this is a person who treats a Torah scholar with contempt. So they say, it's somebody who says like, oh, Rabbi, you're dumb and your ideas are dumb and whatever, right? Like what is treating with contempt? Back in their time, it could be as simple as dishonoring them by not standing when somebody walks in a room. Or it could be as you know, in like that baseline, like, oh, you're an Apikoros. Or it could be as deep as like somebody who denies all of the ideals that that scholar is teaching. You say like, no, that's wrong. There is no God, right? So it's kind of hard to say. It doesn't seem like it necessarily would be heresy. It seems to be a matter of disrespect, which is what they're playing on that pakar term. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi say it's somebody who treats another with contempt in front of a Torah scholar. So it's funny because these are both things about treating somebody with contempt and a Torah scholar being there. But the first is you treat the Torah scholar with contempt. And the second is you treat another human being with contempt and the Torah scholar is present and you're aware. and in front of them, you're still going to treat the person with contempt, which might not seem like a big deal to us. There's slightly different cases. Am I demeaning the sage, or am I demeaning another human being in front of the sage? Why would it matter if the sage is around? In some way, the sages are the face of God, right? So you're knowingly doing it in front of, I would say that's how I understand why they would care. Otherwise, you say contempt with anybody in front of anybody else. But they seem to think a Torah scholar's involved either way. Granted, now they're going to try to figure out the opinions. According to one who says if you treat another with contempt before a Torah scholar, then that's the apikoros mentioned in the Mishnah, right? And one who treats a Torah scholar with contempt would be one who interprets the Torah inappropriately, right? So there's different categories of things you can do wrong. So they say it's fine because if the apikoros, that's the one we're trying to figure out who it is, if you say that's a person who treats another with contempt before the Torah scholar, they don't treat the Torah scholar with contempt, they treat the person next to the Torah scholar with contempt, that's fine because then you can say the one who treats a Torah scholar with contempt is like one who does Torah study inappropriately, right? If you interpret the Torah inappropriately, and therefore you are basically disagreeing with the Torah scholar, right? Like, that's fine. An apikoros can be somebody who demeans somebody else and not a Torah scholar because there's still room for the person who demeans a Torah scholar to do it based on the one who misinterprets Torah, which is another category. But there's a problem because if you're the one who says an apikoros is one who mistreats a Torah scholar, right? Then what is one who interprets Torah inappropriately? Because you would think that's the same category as the one who mistreats a Torah scholar, because when you mistreat a Torah scholar, they're saying they're similar, like you also probably do so on misinterpreting Torah. Although, like, obviously this is a big jump. We don't, like, there should be lots of categories and maybe they're just different, but this is what they're saying. They're saying it might be an issue. So what is that person like then? If you interpret Torah inappropriately, but it's not about demeaning a scholar, this is like Menashe. If we know the story of the kings later on in the books of Kings and stuff, there's a guy Menashe. He's not liked by the rabbis at all. He's the son of Hezekiah, who is liked by the rabbis. And Menashe apparently would teach flawed Torah interpretations, and that's a huge problem. So they're saying it has nothing to do with other scholars sometimes. Sometimes the one who interprets Torah inappropriately is just somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and they go around mistreating Torah and misinterpreting Torah, and they create problems in the world. They're not necessarily an apikoros, but they are a big problem. So it could be the apikoros is the opinion of the first set of rabbis, Rav and Rabbi Chanina. It could be it's Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's opinion. It's unclear right now, right? And so then they come in and they say, and there are those who teach this dispute with regard to the latter clause. They say, no. It's not there. They disagree separately. There are those who say that where it says Rabbi Elazar Hamodai says, one who interprets Torah inappropriately has no share in the world to come, which is the other part of our Mishnah. Rav and Rabbi Chanina say, this is one who treats a Torah scholar with contempt. And Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi say, this is one who treats another with contempt before a Torah scholar. So some say the disagreement is about an apikoros at the start of the Mishnah. We know there's a disagreement. We have it historically down that there's a disagreement on contempt, but we don't know if contempt before a scholar versus contempt before a person refers to one who misinterprets Torah or one who's an apikoros, right? You see how we understand this? So it's unclear. This is one of those moments where we can see the meta level of how Gemara and Talmud are constructed in such a way that they have the arguments. They know there's a disagreement on Torah scholar contempt between these two sets of rabbis, but they don't know if it refers to the first or second part of the Mishnah. And you might say, who cares? We know that they disagree, but it's a big issue because we don't know which topic they were talking about, and we've lost it, right? We just don't know. And the Stam is admitting that because they're saying it could be this or it could be that. And then they move on, right? Like they don't know. So then we're back again. Granted, according to the one who says that one who treats a Torah scholar with contempt is the one mentioned in the Braita who interprets Torah inappropriately, then the one who treats another with contempt before a Torah scholar is characterized as an apikoros. But according to the one who says that you treat with contempt before a Torah scholar is the one mentioned in the Braita who interprets Torah inappropriately, then what's an apikoros, right? So now we go the other way and we say, if you go this direction, fine, but we don't know. Then what's an apikoros in the other case? How do we know? Who does he conduct himself like? So now they're going to say, this is who, in this case, how can we find an example of him? Because we don't have one. Rav Yosef says, this is like one who conducts himself like those who say, In what manner have the sages benefited us with all their Torah study? It's somebody who says, who needs rabbis, right? I say this often. Who needs rabbis? They don't help us. They're not useful, right? That would be an apikoros. That's a person who, they demean sages, but it's slightly different, right? It's slightly different. It's not about misinterpreting Torah. It's about misinterpreting who's helping you and saying, like, our sages aren't useful. They read the Bible for their own benefit. They study the Mishnah for their own benefit. This is somebody who says that, right? They say, who needs rabbis? They just sit in their offices and they read books, and it's not helpful to the world, and it's not helpful to us. And Abaye said to him, that person who questions the benefit provided by sages is also one who misinterprets Torah, right? So he says, that's not an apikoros. That's also just a Torah misinterpreter. Since with that statement, he repudiates the Torah, because what he says, who needs sages, he actually defies Torah law, as it said in the Torah, if not for my covenant, I would not have appointed day and night, the laws of heaven and earth. There's an eternal covenant of Torah that keeps the world going. So when you deny the sages, you deny the Torah. And that sounds like heresy. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, from here too, you can conclude the same concept. Here's another verse. It says, if I find in Sodom 50 just men within the city, then I'll spare the entire place for their sakes. It turns out the righteous are the ones who protect the world where they live, right? So actually, one who says the sages don't benefit me might be an apikoros, but Abaye says, no, that person also just misinterprets Torah, because the Torah says righteous people help to keep the world going. When you deny that, you're denying Torah, because the Torah has the proof for it, either in Jeremiah or Genesis. So they're having issues. They're like, wait, which one's an apikoros? What's a Torah misinterpreter? We know they don't have a share in the world to come, but we want to know, which one are you? When we're going to label you that you can't come to the world to come, we want to be able to point and say, are you an apikoros or are you a Torah misinterpreter? Rather, an apikoros mentioned in the Mishnah might refer to one who conducts himself like one who sits before his teacher, and a halacha that he learned from somewhere else happens to fall in his consciousness, and the student says, this is what we say there, but he does not say it deferentially. This is what the master said, even if he did not learn the matter from his teacher. So here we go again with these really medakdek, very precise honorifics. They're so worried about people getting their due when it comes to teaching in the name of, and not disrespecting teachers in front of other teachers and all of that, right? This doesn't seem like such an egregious sin. But look, they take this very seriously. Maybe you're an apikoros, maybe you're problematic. Seems like you're very disrespectful. If you are sitting with your teacher and then you say, oh, I learned something similar to this elsewhere, and you don't do it deferentially. You don't say what you should. This is what the master said. You just kind of spout what you've got on your mind, right? This is a thoughtless student who just wants to share what they know. Even though it's hurtful or inappropriate or not done in a good way, the student just has to let you know they can't contain themselves. This is a problem, actually, right? So then Rava says the term apikoros refers to one who conducts himself like those from the house of Binyamin the doctor. And what do they say in the house of Binyamin the doctor that's bad, like an apikoros? They say, in what manner have the sages benefited us with all their Torah study? They've never permitted a raven for us. They've never prohibited a dove. Like, the sages don't actually change anything in the world. They just explain things. Who needs explainers? That's not change making in the world. That's just somebody who's telling you blah, 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 blah. This is how the world works. We already know how the world works. Rabbis don't enact change. Who needs them? So that's an apikoros, maybe. Rava said, when they would bring a possible treifa from the house of Binyamin before him, right? They bring something that might be unkosher. When he would see in it a reason to permit its consumption, Rava would say to them, see that I'm permitting a raven for you, as it looks like it would normally be forbidden, but he's going to make it permitted because he would find a reason to say it's good. When he would see in it a reason to prohibit its consumption, Rava would say to them, see that I'm prohibiting a dove for you. So Rava actually says, right, shame on the house of Binyamin the doctor. They say the sages don't make halachic decisions that matter, but actually we do. And he kind of gets them whenever he'd say, look, that would have been forbidden because you don't know halakha well enough, but actually it's permitted. I'm going to permit a raven, not that you can normally eat ravens, but the idea of a raven, it seems like it's not kosher. And he's saying, actually, it is kosher. If not for the sages, you would have to throw it out. And vice versa, even worse, there are times when the food looks kosher, it is not, and so I prohibit a dove to you. You would have eaten it mistakenly. I, as a sage, am benefiting you, you apikoros. You need to be more respectful to the sages. Shame on you, right? So that's what they're saying. And he says that. And then Rav Papa says the apikoros is one who says those sages with contemptuous overtones, like, ugh, the rabbis, right? Ugh, rabbis. Like you say that, right? That's an apikoros. Rav Papa, this is funny. Rav Papa at one time forgot, and he said, like those sages, and then he had to observe a fast to atone. So even the one who teaches you what it is sometimes is guilty of the sin. He said, those guys one time. And then he realized, and he said, oi, why did I say those guys? And so he had to fast to atone for his sin, right? So far, do we have a good idea of what an apikoros is? Sort of. A lot of different guys have said it's a lot of different things. The one thing they all seem to agree on is it involves disrespect in some way, and usually a sage or Torah learning, right? That seems to be the case, but it's unclear exactly which way it is. Depends on who you follow. We don't know yet which one it is either, because all their opinions are different and nobody has said, and that guy is right. Levi bar Shmuel and Rav Huna bar Chia were mending mantles for the sacred scrolls of the school of Rav Yehuda. And when they reached the scroll of Esther, they said the scroll of Esther does not require a mantle. This scroll of Esther does not require a mantle. And Rav Yehuda said to them, a statement of that sort also seems to be irreverent, like the irreverence of an apikoros. You should not say about the scroll of Esther, this scroll, right? So they said this scroll of Esther. And apparently that's offensive. They could have said it in a better way. They should have said Esther's scroll and not this scroll, right? This scroll of Esther. It's not nice. Apparently the way they said it, he found, was bad. Rav Nachman says, an apikoros is one who calls his teacher by his name and does not call him rabbi, right? So you come up to me and you say, this is not a problem for me, but you come up to me, let's say, and we don't have this relationship, and you say, Ben, blah, 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 Ben, blah, 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 right? For the rabbis, that'd be disrespectful, right? I'm Rabbi Ben, blah, 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 right? Whatever, it's fine. You can call me Ben if that's our relationship, but I'm just saying. All right, so he says, what example? Rabbi Yochanan said, for what reason was Gehazi punished? It's because he called his teacher by his name. As Gehazi said, my lord the king, this is the woman and this is her son, whom Elisha revived, right? So he shouldn't have said what he said. Apparently, it doesn't seem that bad, my lord the king, but apparently that was not how he was supposed to call him. Fine. Now, the Gemara relates, the blessed, Holy One, blessed be God, will cause a river to emerge from the Holy of Holies. That's where, God is really present in the temple. Alongside it, all sorts of delicacies will grow. This sounds delicious. As it's stated, and the river upon its bank, on this side and on that side, shall grow every tree for food, whose leaf shall not wither, neither shall its fruit fall. It shall bring forth new fruit every month, because their waters emerge from the sanctuary. Its fruit shall be for food, and its leaf for medicine. We don't really care about the actual teaching here. Watch what happens. But what this teaching is saying is that there's going to be, from the Holy of Holies, there's going to be a river, and the river is going to give birth to all sorts of delicacies because it's food straight from God, basically. So it's going to be super delicious and great. A certain elder said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, well done. And so Rabbi Yochanan said, well done. Very strange. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, because Rabbi Yirmiyah is teaching this, right? Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zera, does a statement of this sort, when one who is not a Torah scholar says to a sage that his statement is correct, seem like the irreverence typical of an apikoros? So he does not have a problem. Rabbi Yirmiyah doesn't have a problem with Rabbi Yochanan saying well done, because you can say well done. You can tell a sage they're correct if you're a sage, because you're a sage, so you know when somebody does a good job. Correct, that's right. But if you're some old guy, some certain elder, like what nerve does this guy have to tell me well done? He doesn't know anything. What's he doing telling me correct? He's not a sage. Is this disrespectful? Maybe. He's asking the question. Seems like he thinks it is. Rabbi Zera said to him, but isn't he supporting your statement? So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, this is the problem, isn't it? This sounds like an apikoros to me. He's being disrespectful to me because he doesn't know enough to know whether or not I'm right. And Rabbi Zera says, but he's saying you're right. How is that disrespectful? He's just agreeing, right? That's what Rabbi Zera says. Rather, he didn't mean disrespect. If you heard that at times supporting the statement of a sage is irreverent, this is what you heard, right? So he says, no. If you're worried that he supported you, that wasn't the problem. That's not being an apikoros. Here it's being an apikoros. It's like the case in which Rabbi Yochanan was sitting and teaching the Holy One, blessed be God, is destined to bring precious stones and jewels that are 30 by 30 cubits, all this jewels and stuff. And he will bore in them an opening 10 cubits wide. So God's going to create this big opening in them and by 20 cubits in height and place them to serve as the gates of Jerusalem. So God's going to take all the jewels in the world and make this beautiful set of gates for Jerusalem. As it's stated, I will make your pinnacles of rubies and your gates of carbuncles, right? God's going to make a beautiful gate for Jerusalem out of all these gems and jewels. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is teaching. A certain student mocked him. So a student of Rabbi Yochanan mocks him and said, now at present, we don't find precious stones that are the size of the egg of a palm dove, right? We don't find precious stones that are even yay big. Are we going to find stones as big as you described? You're talking about huge stones people could walk through. Hey, the world doesn't have stones like that. The world barely has stones like this. Are you ridiculous, Rabbi? What a crazy thing to say, right? So he's a doubter. He's a doubter. Sometime later, that student's ship set sail at sea. You should never make fun of sages, by the way. He saw the ministering angels cutting precious stones that size. So he's out at sea, and out in the sea, for some reason, there are the ministering angels, and they're like, hi ho, hi ho. They're like cutting stones, giant stones for Jerusalem. So he said to the angels, what are you doing? Who are these stones for? And the angel said, the Holy One, blessed be God, is going to make them the gates of Jerusalem, just like your teacher Rabbi Yochanan taught, you doubter. When the student returned, he found Rabbi Yochanan, who was sitting and teaching. The student said to him, my teacher, teach. It's fitting for you to teach, right? Just as you said about the precious stones, so I saw. So he is supporting his teacher now. He comes back and he says, I doubted you, my mistake. I saw the stones. I'm totally wrong. I support you, right? This is the kind of supporter we don't want. Why? Rabbi Yochanan said to him, you're a good for nothing. If you hadn't seen it, would you have believed it? Meaning, no. If you hadn't seen it, you didn't believe me until you physically saw the angels cutting the stones. Then you came back and you said, you're totally right. I need to learn with you. But you didn't say that when it was based on faith and my actual teaching. You only said it because you saw it. You are one who mocks the statements of the sages. And then Rabbi Yochanan looked at him and turned him into a pile of bones. And the lesson of the story, as always, is don't mess with sages, right? Do not mess with sages. In our special magic book about sages, you don't mess with us. That's what the sages say, right? Which is fair. When you write the book, you get to say what you want. Or maybe they really did turn him into a pile of stones or bones. Anyhow, well, coming back to all this stuff, which is delightful and also feels like maybe a little confusing, we'll just put it into context. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts. We started in a place of, well, we really started in a place of love of Torah. Look at all the ways Torah can build the world. And then we moved on to the people who don't build the world. They actually tear it down, mainly by targeting the Torah and specifically the sages, and not having faith in the sages and disrespecting the sages and treating the sages mockingly and contemptuously. Those people tear down the world. And then they went through an interpretation. Is it somebody who treats a Torah scholar with contempt, or who treats somebody near a Torah scholar with contempt? And they didn't come to a conclusion. Some people think one way and some think another. And then they said, like, misinterpreting Torah and treating somebody with contempt and whatever, like, how do we know? Are they proofs from here? Are they proofs from there? And they tried to figure out. It turns out they're both really bad things to do. And then they moved on and they said, really, we want to know what's an apikoros. And they came in and they said, well, it could be one who demeans the sages by ignoring their interpretations. They said it could be one who does not think the sages help them at all. It could be one who treats the sages poorly by not using their name or by not teaching their statements appropriately, right? Or somebody who just uses their words poorly, right? In any case, they bring all these cases and we say to ourselves, gosh, and even the sages make mistakes like this sometimes. A lot of the stories are sages who are doing it. So we can see it's not so hard to be an apikoros, so don't feel bad if you're one too. But don't try to strive for it. It'll cut you off from the world. And they bring in a story at the end and they say, no. There's a great story about what an apikoros might be. We don't know if this is the answer. It's one of the answers. Can't say it's the answer. But what's an apikoros? It can even be somebody who supports you, but only after not having faith in you and mocking you first, right? So even somebody who changes their mind might still be somebody who tears down the world because of the way in which they do it, right? And so we find this great story, and he turns them into bones. Maybe this was not the kindest reception for the student. Maybe the student really had turned over a new leaf. But we find really the value that's being pushed here, I would say, is how disrespect of the system will crush the world. That's how I see it, right? Basically, it's like the world is built upon the system, and ultimately at the heart of it is God and Torah, because Torah is God's words. And therefore, if you disrespect that, and really the sages are the agents for God's words in the world and God's actions, we all are, but the sages are the ones who are really teaching you about it. So if you disrespect the ones who are getting God's words out, you are a world destroyer, and therefore you don't get the world to come because you are causing the people in this world to not be godly and to not be respectful. And it's funny because of all the things they could pick on, you would think like maybe they would say an apikoros is one who eats treif, or maybe like non-kosher food, or maybe an apikoros is one who commits murder. And like those are bad things, But really, at the end of the day, you can see how highly they hold the value of kavod, which is respect, and how everything in their system is built upon it. And it helps to give insight if you're in my other class. When the sages get all particular about who enters a door first, and you say to yourself, what are they, children? The answer is no, actually. They're so indebted to this system that is a hierarchy in terms of how you treat another human being and never demeaning them, and your teacher having certain status. Like, all these things are really important to them because they believe the world functions because of it. So if you kick that out from under them, the world all crumbles into just people being really disrespectful, and ultimately it leading to huge, huge problems, right? They're really interesting because most of us, if we were going to write a tractate on what a heretic is, I don't think we would pick any of the things they picked. And yet the reason they picked the things they did, I think, is because these things really matter to them. And they really believe, like, without this, the world doesn't function halakhically. It doesn't function in terms of law or anything. Because ultimately, if you can walk out of the courtroom and say, like, judges suck and you're terrible and I don't agree with your ideas, like, the whole system evaporates, right? And so this is sort of where I think they're coming from. Really, really, I think, interesting. By the way, if you hear the word apikoros today, people 99% of the time don't mean somebody who treats somebody with disrespect. They mean a heretic in the sense the Rambam talks about it. It's somebody who doesn't believe what you believe, right? And that's completely different from disrespect. But you can see terms change over time. All right, would love to hear y'all's thoughts. I have people in here, so if they have thoughts, I'm happy to hear those. I have people over there, so if they have thoughts, I'd love to hear those. Just get my attention. Yes, I see Mike Ozer. Go ahead.
Rabbi, I appreciate the whole thing about respect. I think it's super interesting. I think this section is just beautiful to read. I also, it's sort of funny because in a bit of a dichotomy though, because while the sages are emphasizing the idea also, even in this, that the teacher learns from the student and the student learns from the teacher. Of course, at the end, they seem
Wait, 1 second, Mike. I can't hear you very well.
All right.
I was trying to change the audio so we can hear you.
Yeah.
In here. This is very quiet. One moment.
Okay. How is it now?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now it's much better. Go ahead. Say
Okay,
again.
I said I appreciate what you said about respect, and that the whole system is about respect, and the sages are indebted to that system. That's very interesting, and the text here is lovely and beautiful. It's sort of a dichotomy, I said, that even in this particular text, there's a part there where they talk about the student learning from the teacher and the teacher learning from the student as being important, and yet at the end, the teacher, the student that doubted the teacher at the beginning or just didn't know is turned into bones. So I would bring up that it also gives you a sense of it made me think of ego and humility in a sense, and Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov, because that is an important aspect of it, even though it isn't mentioned in that way. The issue of ego in the sages is one that I think about quite a bit, even though it's useful to think of the construct the way this puts it out. I also am reminded that every day when we daven during the Amidah, we are saying we say the 11th blessing is a supplication for the restoration of justice to the Jewish judiciary, in a sense. So we're always praying daily that it doesn't that it works the way it should work and not in the wrong way.
Good, great, yeah. And I like the connection of ego because I feel like a lot of really disrespect comes from a place. Most of the statements being made here are things like, what do they do for me? Or I don't think they know better than me, or right? I think it's all lodged in ego and the self. And yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay, here, I'll get Bob and then Phil. Then I can pull you up. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I just want to tell my brother that the fan is right on top of your kippah. So it looks like you have a little helicopter on your kippah. So the text, I mean, the text is, it does express beautifully the idea that people that work with the text becomes them and they become Torah. So there isn't really a line that you can draw between the text and the rabbis that teach the text. You either believe it or you don't believe it. And there's a story, I think it's a Bernard Malamud story called Crown. And in this story, a guy he's kind of a rationalist, kind of a science-oriented guy. He can't believe in anything. And there is this rabbi that is working with him, and he's kind of into Kabbalah, mysticism. And he shows him through his prayers, he shows him a crown above the rabbi's head. And in mysticism, the crown, Keter, is the highest holiness. And he shows this guy this thing in this powerful scene, and it takes the breath away from this rabbi. And then the guy still doesn't believe it because he's such a skeptic. He can't even believe it when he sees it with his own eyes. And I think that is, to a certain extent, what the text is saying, that this text can provide you with these rewards in terms of jewels that it doesn't really make a difference whether you can see them with your own eyes. They are there for you to have, and it is part of your wealth as a person that studies this text, if you believe. And in that sense, I do think this was a beautiful text.
Great. Thank you for that, Bob. I appreciate it. Yeah, Phil, you wanted to share? You can come up here. I'll move out of your way, and that way they can hear you too.
Good morning. So I was just going to say something very similar to what Bob said. For me, the sections that we just read have in common they're all about emphasizing the importance of respect for Torah and those who teach Torah, regardless in the fashion. And I think that's similarly echoed in all of the prayers and all of our traditions, that's one of our paramount tenets. And that's what came out of it, simply for me.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I would just conclude by saying, and I love all the things y'all shared. I would just keep in mind that not that everything's a dichotomy in the world. It either is or it isn't. But the idea that a lot of the Talmud is running you between two different poles. And so on the one hand, you have what happens when you basically come in with a lack of humility, a lack of ability to believe and have faith. And then the other side of and how that can destroy worlds. And then the flip side is when you come in with an open heart and whatever, and embrace and this, that, the other, how you can build worlds. And I feel like with everything else, with the free will, it's up to you, right? The Talmud says it's up to you. If you want to be a builder, then do this. And if you want to be a destroyer, which you shouldn't, but if you do, this is how you would do that, right? And it's up to you. And God gives you the raw material, and it says choose life, like God suggests choose life, but you could choose death, right? And we'll see that many parshiot from now. It says choose life. I've set before you life and death. I've set before you blessing and curse. Choose life, choose blessing. it's up to you. And it's so important. I feel like it fits so well in Sanhedrin, both because of the values in there and how Torah infuses judgment, as well as like with a judging court and whatever else, right? They're going to have to make decisions that really matter, and they need to make ones that follow the way of love and Torah and light and those sorts of things. So great. Well, thank you guys. Next week, I think we're on. It's normal, right? Yeah, it's normal. In a few weeks. Oh no, Shavuot won't be on Wednesday. I think we're good to go. I think all the Wednesdays up until I leave June, I don't know, 14th, 13th, whatever. I think we're good to go. If not, we'll let y'all know. But otherwise, we're going to get to the end of Sanhedrin. We'll have a Siyum that last Wednesday before the 13th or whatever of June. Otherwise, we hope y'all have a great day, and we'll see y'all soon. Boker Tov, good morning.
Boker